Hello, world singers. My name is Tyler.
And my name is Brooke.
And this is
Cosmere Conversations.
Welcome back, all of you lovely listeners. We got some more things cooking with the chronological feeds and episodes that we have been bringing lately. We've seen Kaladin, we've seen Shallan, and today we're doing Big D himself, Big Dalinar. Perhaps the most dense because one of the oldest characters.
Yes.
And so we have a lot to get to. We're going to give you the same type of format that you've seen previously. But first, we want to give a shout out to the recent patrons who have joined a paid tier over on Patreon. All of these people and all of our patrons qualifying for a raffle giveaway. This is now your last chance. You need to go to our Patreon. And by this Sunday, after this episode's release, that's like November 3rd, for those of you who are using the Gregorian calendar, get on our Patreon at any paid tier and remain so for the month of November. And in December, we will do a raffle giveaway for Looking for the Light by Shandel Green.
Beautiful art book filled with gorgeous Cosmere art. And let's give a shout out to some of our new patrons. Thank you so much, CRM201.
Teresa O, we really appreciate you.
Marcus B, welcome to the Patreon.
Mara G, hope we're pronouncing that right, but if we are not, you let us know and we'll fix it the next time around. Thanks for being a patron.
Daniel B, thank you so much for joining us on Patreon.
Eric A, you get an A in life. We appreciate you.
And finally, William M. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Again, you have until November 3rd to join up at a paid tier over on Patreon to get involved in the raffle. But right now, put on your biggest of thinking caps. I want bigger than a Harry Potter hat. I am talking a full 10-gallon sized hat that just goes right on and gives you a thinking fabrial. That's what you're going to need to start digesting the life of Dalinar Kholin. During the reread, it has been so wonderful to really focus on these characters and to see their timelines play out. I think the Shallan episode really helped me get some perspective, but then getting through Oathbringer on my reread, diving into Rhythm of War now, Dalinar's story is central, literally the third book in the 5, and it's kind of like a pivot point around which the story moves.
Yeah.
Both books 1 and 2 kind of feel introductory, and then Oathbringer, something different happens. The war is on, the battles, the scope, it really kind of expands outwards, and so that's hinging all on Dalinar.
And I think just the volume of flashbacks that we get from Dalinar's point of view, there is a lot. And so it really fills up the timeline for us as we know it. So let's put it all in chronological order. What does Dalinar's life look like when we set it all out in order?
As is my tradition, we start at the end. 1175, the 5th month, the 1st week, the 1st day. That is the first of the final 10 days and when Wind and Truth will start. We are relying on a lot of the notes that make up the official interactive Roshar map that includes a timeline. That timeline was put together by longtime user and friend of the pod, Jafu. We love you, Jafu. Thank you for all this stuff. Dalinar, we're going to start with the conquest of Dalinar. Obviously, he's born. He has a young person's life.
Some type of childhood.
Yeah.
We assume
but then,
he was once young.
But then we get to the conquest of Alethkar, and Dalinar, Gavilar, and Sadeas are waging war with the fellow princedoms, kind of picking them off one by one and adding to their coalition that will eventually, we know, become the unified Alethkar.
Which is their goal. Their goal is to unite Alethkar under a single king. And in this case, the king that they're putting on the throne is Gavilar.
This starts with Dalinar at the age of 19. Just to put that in perspective, it is the exact same age of Kaladin during his story. So a little bit of a parallel there. Obviously, Dalinar's story is longer, but I find it interesting that both of them go to war and kind of have these transformative experiences beginning around the same time.
Yeah. During the conquest, the brothers go to the Rift, and this is where Dalinar fights Bright Lord Tanalan and wins his Shard Blade. After a really brutal fight, he follows Tanalan to his safe house where his wife and his young son are hiding. And this young boy tries to warn Dalinar away using his father's Shard Blade. His father is injured, and Dalinar can't bring himself to kill this young child trying to defend his family, but he takes the Shard Blade, this is Oathbringer, and tells Gavilar and Sadeas that he did kill the heir to this princedom.
Yes, this is different than the famous burning that we'll get to later. This is the first experience at the Rift. The blade itself is the victory, and for the next decade or so, we will be experiencing Dalinar only through flashbacks. So we just kind of like pop into moments of his life and kind of get a little bit of context or from his memories about this time. He's going to go from the age of 20 and have various different experiences, a lot of them revolving around his interaction with the Thrill. This is kind of like his peak Thrill time through the ages of 20.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of fighting, so that's not surprising when we think about it that way. During one of these battle excursions, Dalinar is possessed by the Thrill, and he becomes inspired, I guess, to kill Gavilar and to take the crown for himself. At the very last minute, he sees his brother's face and he kind of snaps out of it and is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that thought even crossed my mind. I can't believe that I would even think about killing my brother. And this moment he kind of buries deep down inside, and it haunts him a little bit for the rest of his life.
After the Kholins have conquered more than 50% of the kingdoms, there is a noticeable shift in Gavilar's tone. He begins to play the politician more and to try to approach conflicts using political or economic means, maybe eventually some subterfuge.
More diplomacy.
Sadeas is joining Gavilar in this element, and that's leaving Dalinar out. The more political machinations are going on, the less useful Dalinar, the soldier or the warrior, is. He's not really at the point of being a general, though he is like high up. He is much more in the mindset of like, I'm a warrior, I'm a killer, and once that wind is kind of taken out of his sail, his life does begin to get rocky. And I think part of that is the entire experience of Gavilar, Dalinar, Navani, this love triangle that is going on during the same period. Navani is going to eventually marry Gavilar. Dalinar, I think, is going to get correct hints that Navani was interested in him.
Yeah.
And this is something that eventually Gavilar and Navani fight over quite a bit, and there's like personal attacks thrown between them. But I think it's all legitimate. Like there's real hurt amongst this group of three people, and they all deal with it in their own way. But Dalinar especially is withdrawing during this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not necessarily that Gavilar and Sadeas are trying to exclude Dalinar, but Dalinar kind of excludes himself. He doesn't have a whole lot of confidence or interest, to be frank, in this shift in their focus. He is still, a young man who just wants to be out there more active, taking an active role, which in this case looks like fighting, unfortunately. And he kind of gets not ostracized, but he feels out of place. He's not married, and he's not really sure what his role is in this new chapter of the kingdom that they're building. It's during this time that Gavilar, along with help from his wife Navani and Sadius's wife, arrange a political marriage for Dalinar with Evie. Evie and her brother have been exiled from Rira. They're looking for alliances, and Evie has a set of shard plate that she can give as a dowry, which is the thing that attracts the Kholins to Evie. At this point, Dalinar is like, well, I can't have the woman that I actually love, Navani, so like, fine, whatever, I don't really care.
Yeah, kind of doubling down or reinforcing this contradiction that he's feeling, like he's choosing to do things he doesn't want to do for the benefit of Gavilar. And I think that leads to some of the anger that he has. But Evie is an interesting person in her own right. Her people see her, she is outcast, her and her brother are outcast, and that shard plate is considered stolen. It will come back into the story as Rira is one of the kingdoms that joins the singers / joins Odium's forces. And something they point to is, yo, you're wearing our stolen shard plate. Probably at that time it's handed off because Dalinar's not wearing it. But
yeah, it's Adolin's.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Adolin's
so
shard plate.
It's a signal to them of something that will fester for several decades after these events. But these events occur 11:45, first month, 9th week, 3rd day. Dalinar is 24 and 7 months. Evie is 20 and 6 months. So unlike many
decent age gap.
Yeah, unlike many fantasy worlds and many political marriages in our own world, a respectable age gap for this couple. There's nothing really too awkward here. You love to see it. There's plenty of death and chaos, but there's not that other stuff.
Dalinar is feeling quite restless as the full conquest of Alethkar kind of dwindles down and comes to a close. And he starts to seek out alcohol and fire moss, as well as brawling and like picking fights in pubs to cope with these feelings of withdrawal from the thrill and the lack of the activity that has always been in his life from the time that he was, a teenager. And so Gavilar sends Dalinar to deal with border skirmishes to kind of get him away, get him on his feet, get him doing something active. Dalinar is away for several years fighting. And during this time, his wife gives birth to Adolin. Adolin grows up. Renarin is born. Dalinar is not even involved enough with his family to name his son Renarin.
Yeah, kind of forgets about the experience or like the timeline of birth and overlooks Renarin's birth. I think,
and ignores like all of the letters that people have sent to him saying like, hey, your son's been born. What would you like to name him?
100%. Just an absentee father.
Yeah, completely absentee.
I think that the day Adolin is born is also the exact same day that Gavilar says you have to go to the border skirmishes.
Yes, correct.
So it's made very clear, and Dalinar like battles with himself for a moment of like, I'm kind of feeling good.
Because it's like a possible turning point, I think, for him. I think there's a world where Dalinar meets his first son for the first time and like kind of starts to turn things around and finds a new purpose in life, but he never gets that chance. He's immediately sent back to the battlefield, back to the person he's always been.
And notably, we'll get to it, but it's not his first son, but his second son, not his birth, but many, many years later, that will actually mark a turning point. So before we get there, though, let's continue, because these brawls and eventually the border skirmishes, they do represent a giving into the thrill. Yeah, I mean, he is fully accepting and kind of like chasing the thrill, different from what we see with Teft in the more direct, like Fire Moss. But this is Dalinar's drug.
Yes, 100%.
It's going to be about 4 or 5 years, but Evie is going to join Dalinar on his campaigns. This is a campaign in Jah Keved, and just for the quick geography check, Alethkar is large, unified country in the middle of the Shattered Plains to the east, and Jah Keved to the west. So he is in Jah Keved when Evie, the boys, eventually meet up, and this marks a little bit of a turning point because he does have moments that I think provide himself and provide Adolin, not Renarin, but Adolin with some core memories that they both enjoy. Like he is having moments when he is experiencing, teaching Adolin something, bringing him into war meetings as like a little kid. He's like 5 to 7, during this period. And I think Dalinar is enjoying being a father in that way, still like the general, but enjoying being a father in that way. And then there are other times of still complete neglect and anger and like hatred that his family is around him to see the quote unquote worst of him.
Yeah. There's an interesting dynamic where he kind of always feels like he's disappointing Evie and he's never able to be the person that she wants him to be or the person that she sees he could become. She's kind of always encouraging him to become a better man and make different choices. And he doesn't like the feeling of failing her. And he kind of turns that feeling against her.
Yeah.
I think it's more like frustration with himself.
Definitely more frustration with himself.
But he turns it outward and then sort of wants to avoid Evie because he doesn't want to feel the negative feelings that he feels about himself.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we could use the concept of a mirror. Evie acts as a mirror for Dalinar and can like see the worst of himself in this reflection of the woman he's hurting or putting this hatred on. And he's eventually going to do a very similar thing to both of his sons after Evie's death. We're not quite there yet, but we do have this call back to the rift. So the campaigning for Dalinar goes on from when he is 29 to when he's about 41. And then the rift or the return at the rift is around his 42nd birthday. So Dalinar is now definitely transitioned into the full like leader role of the military. As a shard bearer, he is quite literally what the military builds itself around, and he kind of needs to be a part of this big campaign to retake the rift.
Yeah, basically because Dalinar allowed the little boy to live, that little boy has
grown up and summoned the supporters of his father and now his rightful claim.
Yeah, obviously he has a grudge against the man who killed his father.
As, all respect, he should. Like that's a totally fine thing.
It's like, I mean, what did you think was going to happen?
But Gavilar has failed in the diplomatic efforts, sends Dalinar's army to meet Sadeas's army. That's an important point at the rift. And Dalinar is going to arrive there first, again, to kind of place us geographically. Kholinar is almost in the center of Alethkar. Directly south, there is the city of Rathalas, nicknamed, of course, the Rift. Rathalas is right on the mouth of a river that leads into this big inland lake, and that inland lake is actually home to Celebrant in Shadesmar.
Oh, that's interesting.
Very interesting. So Rathalas is kind of like on one side in the physical realm, and then Celebrant in Shadesmar is on the other side of this inland lake. But that inland lake then takes a river out to the Tarat Sea, and that leads to the ocean. It's right above Thalena. So it's kind of a hugely important city for all of Alethkar, because like goods flow to Rathalas and then flow out to the ocean itself. What this means is it's essential for Gavilar to get this place under control. He sends Dalinar, and it's really just going to be a back and forth between Dalinar's better and worse aspects. We're going to see kind of like everything on display here, because Evie is going to try to convince Dalinar to like take a last chance, like a deep breath with everyone, go meet Tanalan and like just talk to him and say, fix it. Like we can fix this without fighting. Let's do something. And so Dalinar takes that opportunity.
Yeah, he actually listens to Evie. He's like, okay, fine. I will try it your way. So he goes and he talks to Tanalan, and Tanalan tells him that actually Sadeas is a traitor. And Sadeas has been working with Tanalan against the crown in this collusion. And he's kind of like, you know what? Take a look at your own house, my man, because you have bigger problems than me. Dalinar takes him at his word and thinks that he kind of sees a Sadeas party, and he takes his elites on an expedition to investigate this party to prove that Sadeas has been betraying them, but it is a trap. All of his elites get killed, and Dalinar's almost killed. He's like buried alive, basically, because they know that they can't fight the Blackthorn, so they dump a bunch of rocks on him.
And then he's like dying at the bottom. They're pulling off the rocks to get his shards, they assume, because he's dead.
Yeah.
And then he like bursts up, kills them all as like his armor is falling off of him.
Kind of the only way that he even stays alive is because of the thrill.
Exactly. It's fueling him in a way similar to how Spren seemed to fuel our radiance and kind of like give them, the stormlight, but the thrill is giving what it can. And that's this energy or this sense of purpose that is driving Dalinar, and it will allow him to return to camp. He's like literally like walking through the forest, but he gets back to his main army, and in this thrill haze or thrill rage, he is going to order the absolute destruction of the rift. He like kind of very clearly says, we're going to make a statement. Nobody's going to get out alive, and we're going to attack as soon as we can. I need like a moment to collect myself. We know that during that moment, Evie is going to leave and try to go make a last-ditch plea. He does not know that.
Right. So they light the rift on fire. After a while, Dalinar's battle lust kind of dies down, and he's like, okay, it's enough. It's enough. Like, we did enough. Don't do any more. Just leave an exit route, and whoever else is alive, let them leave. But his team is like, you told us not to let anyone get out alive, and we followed your orders, so there's no going back now. Yeah. Literally everyone is gonna die.
Exactly. He had lit the rift on fire from the top. His other army had lit the rift on fire from the bottom. There's no escape. The entire thing's gonna burn. Dalinar had come across that prison where he had met Tanalan as a young boy.
Right. What used to be a safe house.
Exactly. Sorry. Did used to be a safe house. And he cuts it open with his shard blade, the same shard blade that he had taken from Tanalan, throws a bunch of oil down there, and like faintly hears screaming before going off to the palace to find Tanalan proper.
So they recover Tanalan, and Tanalan tells Dalinar that Evie came to him to try to broker an agreement, to try to smooth this all over. But Dalinar had killed all of the messengers coming out of the city, so he had no idea that this meeting was happening, didn't get any of those messages. Dalinar tells Tanalan about how he destroyed his old safe house, and Tanalan's like, yeah, we don't use that as a safe house anymore because it wasn't safe, obviously. You found us there. We use it as a jail. And Dalinar realizes that the actions that he took actually burned Evie alive as she was in this prison.
The realization is certainly going to haunt Dalinar for the rest of his life, and the ramifications are still things that are being felt in all of Roshar to this day. But it is important to note that a lie is told at this time. It is agreed, mainly by Sadeas' suggestion, but agreed among the High Council, that they are going to say Evie was killed before the attack begun by assassins.
Right, that is actually the justification for the attack.
And they are not going to tell the king, at least up front, that what they are saying is a lie. So the king is under the impression that things played out in the false sense, just as all of the people. They're going to keep the king in the dark as well. And I think we can say that while the unholy trinity between Gavilar, Dalinar, and Sadeas maybe was always going to fall, these secrets are too much for the three to, remain strong through, and it's certainly going to be downhill from here. But Rathalas is subdued. The unity that Gavilar is seeking is won. Alethkar is officially one kingdom after this point as the other resisting kingdoms kind of all fall in line, and Gavilar becomes king of a united Alethkar for the first time since his ancestor, the Sunmaker.
This leads Dalinar into one of his darkest times. He's got a lot of dark times, but this is definitely one of them. He is understandably haunted by his actions at the Rift. He becomes a full-blown alcoholic to try to cope with his PTSD and his guilt.
It's during this alcoholic period that's going to last for several years. This is not a short bender that Dalinar is on, but the time he is spending in Kholinar, eventually he's like cleaning out everybody's stores of alcohol. The cooks all know, like, when he comes around, you have to hide the alcohol. And he develops a relationship that he returns to that we see in one of the flashbacks. I think this is one of the more important moments in Oathbringer, maybe one of the more important moments in all of Stormlight Archive. It involves the Herald Jezrien. He's going by the name Ahu during this scene, and he's said to be a beggar, a drunk, but always willing to share with Dalinar. They have a conversation as they are drinking together that I think is quite meaningful, and I want to introduce this so that I can come back and make some predictions right before Wind and Truth. But one of my big concepts that I've been working with since our episode on the Heralds and on the Unmade is that I'm really messed up about the Unmade, about the Heralds, and maybe just about cognitive shadows in general. I think the Heralds are bad. I think the Oath Pact is bad. I don't like the idea of the Heralds at all. Certainly don't want an Oath Pact reforged or anything like that going into Wind and Truth. But part of why I'm so concerned about the Heralds is what we see from Ahu in this moment. Would you help me read out? Would you play Ahu in our back and forth? Dalinar is taking a swig and Ahu is seemingly kind of like going mad or ranting a little bit. Would you read his rants for us?
Sure. Quote, "Madness," Ahu said, then giggled. "I used to think it wasn't my fault. But we can't escape what we did. We let them in. We attracted them, befriended them, took them out to dance and courted them. It is our fault. You open yourself to it and you pay the price. They ripped my brain out and made it dance. I watched." End quote.
Dalinar at this point freezes and hands the bottle back to Ahu and is like, "You need this more than I do, friend." I think that this single paragraph is meaningful, and I know it's coming from someone who is mad or tormented to the point of insanity.
Yeah.
But I am believing that this is kind of descriptively true, that what Ahu Jezrien is saying in their madness is basically accurate, and that when it comes to the Unmade, it is the Herald's fault. They did something that led to the creation of the Unmade, which is maybe a corruption, maybe a perversion of existing spren on Roshar, something like a spren or akin to a spren, but then it gets corrupted or converted into a servant of Odium. And I think what Jezrien here is saying is that it's our fault because we tried to use them, because we wanted a part of their power, we wanted maybe to bond with them in the way that honor is kind of bonded to the Stormfather, cultivation kind of bonded to the Night Watcher. If the Herald started thinking a little bit above their calling a little bit, then maybe they say, hey, we should have a big, powerful spren as well.
I think there's a question about what this quote is saying, and I think we talked about it a few episodes ago, because there's some more context that kind of surrounds this one quote that we pulled out that I think puts it more into question of like what exactly he's talking about.
Certainly. I do think that there are a lot of explanations and none of this is like hard or concrete, but I do want to put out there that I am seeing a lot more connections between the Unmade and the Heralds than I did previously. And I think there might be some entanglement there. There might be a connection between the Heralds and the Unmade, as if in part of their torture, something was ripped out of the Heralds that was used to bind them to the Unmade.
I feel like you're really over reading into this.
Completely possible. You let us know what you think about this theory and the conversation with Ahu. Am I blowing it out of proportion, or is there some important secrets that could come from this quote?
Okay, let's get back to Dalinar, because this is his story. It's during this time period that Dalinar takes Gavilar on a hunt to the Shattered Plains, and this is when they meet the Parshendi. Dalinar is about 46 years old at this point, and he does not seem to have really a significant relationship with either one of his sons at this point. He believes that Adolin is too ostentatious and emotional, and he kind of reminds him of Evie, and so he doesn't really want to engage with that at all. And Renarin is just kind of a useless invalid to Dalinar that he kind of just completely ignores Renarin. He rarely ever even thinks of Renarin by name. He calls him like the boy or the other son. And it's like, you weren't there to name him. So if you hate his name, that's your fault. But it's during this time that we get this really impactful scene where the two boys try to help Dalinar during a particularly low point, as Dalinar is frantically searching for alcohol to quiet his brain, and he lashes out at them. And then he feels tremendous guilt for kind of the person that he has become, that he is the man who lashes out at his two young sons who are actually, you know, great people.
Yeah, just want to love and help him. And this is when Renarin shows up with the bottle of alcohol that like he keeps secret so that he can eventually give it to his dad in these low states.
Yeah.
And that moment is going to break Dalinar. He's going to be crying with Renarin. I think if it could have been Adolin's birth all those years ago, this is actually the moment where we see a hard pivot for Dalinar. So the rock bottom I consider for Dalinar to be this moment right here. He's 46 years old and 6 months.
And he does try to be better after that. He really wants to be a better father, and so he puts in some effort. He thinks that he's gotten a handle on his drinking. He doesn't really drink while he's in Kholinar, but he does strategically plan trips like once a month out to the Alethi countryside, where ostensibly he's like checking in on the High Lords, but it's actually kind of an excuse just so that he can go on benders away from the palace. And he's like, this is fine. It's basically like Shallan with her 3 personas being like, no, we found balance. Like, really, it's good. I've got it all under control. Like, not really though.
You have it under a temporary control. You like are barely controlling it for a little bit of time. And that is the danger that we see with Dalinar, is that while he is improving, it is not without admitting this part of him, this kind of like truly destructive part of him.
Yeah, it's like a surface level improvement, but he hasn't done the work.
Yeah.
He hasn't done the deep work to actually solve the root of the problem.
The house has termites, but Dalinar slaps some new paint on it.
Yeah.
He's looking good from the outside.
And we see sort of the false front to this, because during the feast that is celebrating this new treaty with the Parshendi, Dalinar is drunk, blacked out, completely unable to help defend his brother as Gavilar is killed by Zeph.
That's about a year of this kind of like behavior that we see. So the date of Gavilar, very important on the calendar, 1167, 1073.
Of course, this is just kind of another event that adds additional guilt and shame to Dalinar's back. He feels terrible that he was drunk while his brother was killed and Dalinar was unable to help, especially given that Gavilar specifically told him to follow the codes that night, which would have meant abstaining from drink.
After Gavilar's funeral, or really ending his time at Gavilar's funeral, Dalinar is fleeing to get away. He wants to get drunk. He wants to black it all out, but he comes across Yasna reading The Way of Kings. He is going to sit with her all night and through the next day as she completes the entire reading for him. And he will decide in this moment to seek out the Night Watcher, to ask for the ability to change, and remembering that this is what Evie told him, that the Night Watcher can help a man change.
Yeah, this is kind of the moment when he realizes that despite his best efforts, he needs more help. Basically, that he has done the best that he could up until this point, but he has PTSD. Like, he is dealing with some real things that he legitimately, I think, can't move past on his own.
Yeah.
And so he seeks out something else that can help, something outside of himself to help him get a handle on himself.
In our world, a person would hopefully have the ability to go to therapy, seek out medication, really get a handle on things with outside.
Right.
They have the magical Night Watcher.
Yeah.
Like, that's their only way out of this circumstance, or the only one that Dalinar sees. He is going to head towards the Night Watcher for a geography check. This is far to the west of Alethkar. It is technically in the same mountains and directly south as Urithiru, and is kind of just centrally located on the entire map of Roshar, the Night Watcher's Valley, or really Cultivation's Valley. Dalinar is going to seek out the Night Watcher when he is 48 years old. And so Dalinar is going to move south through Alethkar, and then instead of going to the Shattered Plains, he says he's going with an advance force to the Shattered Plains, but his goal is always to travel westward to the valley and seek out the Night Watcher, and then meet up with the rest of the army and beginning the War of Reckoning against the Parshendi.
On this expedition, the World Hopper Felt is with Dalinar. Dalinar doesn't know that he's a World Hopper, but Felt is always an interesting person to keep an eye out for. Dalinar starts to make his way through the Night Watcher's forest, and he sees visions of burning Rathalos, of killing Evie, of the time that he almost killed Gavilar. He sees a potential future where he kills Elokar to take the throne for himself. And then finally the Night Watcher appears, and she refers to Dalinar as the Son of Honor and the Son of Odium, which is quite an interesting title here. Dalinar ends up asking the Night Watcher for forgiveness, and that's not something that the Night Watcher can grant. And so
yeah, she actually kind of gets angry at it. She reacts as if she's been struck.
She's how dare you?
Yes, exactly. And she throws out a bunch of other things. She's like, ask me for power or riches. I can give you a blade that bleeds black smoke.
AKA Nightblood.
Of course, Dalinar doesn't want any of these things. And it's at that moment that the Night Watcher gets kind of a tap on the back. And Mama Cultivation steps in and is like, shoo, child. This one is mine.
Cultivation agrees to, quote unquote, prune Dalinar by taking away his memories of burning the rift and also all of his memories of Evie. She does warn before she does this that the memories will grow back. And Dalinar agrees to this. He says, yes, just take them away now. Immediately afterwards, he has no recollection of meeting Cultivation. He doesn't really remember what he asked for or what he received. It's kind of all glossed over in his mind. He even thinks to himself, like, oh, this was kind of silly, wasn't it?
Yeah, waste of time.
Why did I even come here? What a dumb idea. All right, well, back to the War of Reckoning. Everything's fine. But now that he is freed of these memories that were kind of trapping him in this downward spiral, Dalinar resolves to become a better man. He resolves to start following the Alethi codes of war. And this is when he really starts to become the person that we meet him as, the Way of Kings Dalinar.
Functionally Dalinar will move to the Shattered Plains. The armies will meet him there. They set up the 10 war camps, and for a period of 3 years will be fighting the Parshendi. And at that point, the Way of Kings, our book, begins. Dalinar is 53 and 2 months, the year 1173, the 6th month, the 9th week, the 4th day. Remember, once these books start and until the point of a Rhythm of War, when we have our time jump, this is basically all happening within a couple of months. So no real time or date updates from here on out, because we're really just like going forward here. But we now have Dalinar's past all behind us, and then the books and all the events that we see from the books are ahead.
And so Dalinar begins receiving visions during the high storms. This combined with the new values that he has gained as a result of reading The Way of Kings, he is finding himself increasingly ostracized from Alethi society.
He does make the decision to remain in power, trying to convince the high princes to work together to bring an end to the war with the Parshendi, based on that single strong, powerful voice demanding that he unite them. And we still don't know what that means. What was it really about?
Yeah, there's I think still a big question about what exactly those words mean. I don't know if we know yet. But Dalinar mistakenly interprets one of his visions to indicate that he should trust Sadeas. And Sadeas, of course, takes advantage of this trust. And we have the Battle of the Tower, where Sadeas leaves Adolin and Dalinar and their army to die.
Dalinar is saved by Bridge 4 and Kaladin swearing the second ideal. Dalinar is going to return with a quarter of the army that's set out and buy all of the bridgemen from Sadeas' camp by giving up Oathbringer, the thing that kind of sent
his glory and his shame.
Yes, exactly. From the text itself, like just a perfect bookend for this life of Dalinar. Remember, Kaladin later talks about how he's become different persons, like 4 different persons he's been in his life. Dalinar is certainly, with a longer life, been many different people, but there is the Dalinar who takes from a child Oathbringer, and then there is Dalinar who gives up Oathbringer to save the lives of all the bridgemen. And I think that afterwards, Dalinar the Radiant and the path of the Bondsmith, that's all a different person. We are kind of seeing the culmination of this version of Dalinar.
Then Dalinar decides to try a new tactic. He names himself the High Prince of War, which allows him to enforce cooperation among the High Princes. And as part of this strategy, Adolin begins dueling for shards. It's also around this time that Dalinar and Navani start up their taboo romantic relationship. And Dalinar begins preparing for an assault out on the Shattered Plains against the Parshendi.
He is, of course, going to be joined by some allies at this point. Sabariel, Roion, and Aladar end up joining the final assault. And we know that Shallan is going to be on this assault helping with the mapping. Kaladin is going to be back in the camps as he's recovering from his injuries and recovering from almost killing Syl. Dalinar is leading the final battle and kind of preparing when Szeth arrives and attacks and kills Aladar, and then sends Dalinar flying up into the sky. An apparent successful assassination until our big man superhero arrives flying and catches him and gives his super cool line about sending someone to the sky to die.
Yeah. After this battle, they end up at Orethiru, and Dalinar swears his ideals as a bondsmith with the Stormfather, saying, quote, "I will unite instead of divide. I will bring men together." End quote.
Yeah, and only a period of about 4 months from the beginning of Way of Kings until the finding of Orethiru, or Dalinar's second ideal. The bonding of the Stormfather is the first that has happened in a very long time, but it is notable as well because Dalinar is the first person to bond the elevated Stormfather. Whatever honor did to the Stormfather now gives Dalinar something that we still don't know
Yeah.
the full potential of, but it is remarked many times that he has become kind of a new bondsmith. Okay, so we're at the end now of Words of Radiance, the beginning of Oathbringer, and a lot of Oathbringer are the flashbacks that we've already talked about. Dalinar's kind of quest during this time is one of uniting the different monarchs. And so he's
graduated from trying to unite the High Princes to now trying to unite all of the ruling people of the continent and planet of Roshar.
Yeah, and I have a question for our listeners. I want you to think about it, because from this point on, I think everybody's joining Team Dalinar. Nobody is like, you know what, I really love Taravangian. I think anybody reading these books is a big fan of Dalinar, certainly from this point on. But we've looked at his entire life now.
Yeah.
And I want to know from our listeners, at what points in Dalinar's life, or when Dalinar is what version of himself, would you never follow him in war?
Yeah.
And at what points would you likely follow him? I think we can all agree we're on the bandwagon of the Radiance. We want to follow you now, Dalinar, second ideal bondsmith.
I do think it's interesting in Oathbringer to start to see
their perspective,
the way that external people see Dalinar more so, like the other monarchs, and how they perceive him.
Exactly. If you are the leader of Thalina, a person from Yakaved or Azir, and this guy is coming to you, talking about the end of the world and saying that like he needs secret access into your biggest cities in your kingdoms, how are you going to react is largely a perception of how you view the Blackthorn. And so to our listeners, you let me know. Do you think that you would have followed Dalinar in every period of his life? Are there sometimes you'd be like, nah, I don't like war. Like anytime that he's doing off on campaign, nay. Hit me with some feedback, because I love knowing people's thoughts, but this book of Oathbringer to me is really about perspective. We get so many changes in perspective, including the big one, the revelation about humans being the invaders. So so many different perspectives as Dalinar is trying to unite the monarchs. And he does a little uniting himself, or I guess the Stormfather does the uniting, but he gets married to Navani to start off Oathbringer.
Yeah, he and Navani officially get married, and the Stormfather officiates their wedding because the Ardents are all mad at Dalinar for saying that God is dead. And there is also the relationship between Dalinar and Elhokar, of course, Navani's son and Dalinar's nephew. There is both personal tension between them, but also some kind of political tension between them, because Dalinar puts himself out there, takes charge a lot, and Elhokar is supposed to be king. So Elhokar decides to resolve this conundrum by declaring that Dalinar is the High King of Urithiru, Elhokar is king of Alethkar, and so they have separate roles. There is a way in which Elhokar expects to serve under Dalinar a little bit, but at least they kind of each have their own designated roles. As Dalinar is starting on this journey of uniting all of the Rosharan monarchs, he begins to recover his memories about Evie and the events surrounding her death.
He's going to use first span reads and kind of traditional means of trying to communicate with the other leaders, but he keeps running into false perspectives or negative perspectives based on his very terrifying history. And he instead comes up with a new method, a new way of using the visions from the Stormfather by bringing in the leaders and having conversations with them in person. He convinces Fen fairly early on, but he's also making work with Yanagan, the young leader prime of Azir. And this is kind of bearing lots of fruit. It's a good method until he has his first run-in with Odium, realizing that the visions are something that Odium can step into, maybe control and maybe control the people inside of the vision. So,
but he is able to make a lot of good connections with
Enough,
those monarchs. And he eventually is even able to visit Azir in person to try to secure this alliance. While he is there, he learns how to use capital C connection to speak the Azish language. And one of the Azish viziers tells Dalinar that she's surprised at how civilized he is. From what she knows of the Blackthorn, she expected him to basically just be a savage animal. And this comment sparks Dalinar to remember everything that happened at the Rift, and he collapses under the weight of these memories.
Dealing with such tremendous pressure and the timeline that is just so compressed, he is still trying to work mainly with Queen Fen to stabilize the alliance, but he is now personally struggling with the memories as they are kind of hitting him like a ton of bricks every day. It's interesting to me that that time that he forged a connection is also the trigger for his memories to return and kind of come flooding back. And I would have to think that there are so many people who have these negative interpretations of what happened at the Rift. And because of how things work on Roshar, thoughts lead to something important in the cognitive realm, like a pool of investiture. Spren can pop up there, but I would have to think that there's just like a big dam being held back from Dalinar all this time about what has gone on at the Rift, and it's some of that he is now connecting to and like has opened himself up to these memories. I think the memories are all like there in the cognitive realm, and that's what cultivation basically like blocked off in a way. And so we get that when he opens himself up, that's the return or the breakage of the dam.
Eventually, Dalinar travels to Thaylen City to survey the damage there from the Everstorm, and he ends up sending Sadeas's troops, which are now being led by Amaram, to help the city recover. And then he also calls in Renarin to do some healing for the citizens that have suffered, buildings falling on them and all of the ramifications of the Everstorm. Dalinar is still kind of struggling to be a diplomat. He is not confident in these skills. He is maybe, not very practiced, not very good at these particular skills. And as a way to do something that he feels like is more useful, more tangible, he ends up using his bondsmith abilities to repair the temple of Telenolot, literally uniting the stones back together.
And that is his other power. That's tension shared with the Stone Wards. And we saw adhesion shared with the Windrunners previously. So we have these two displays of his abilities. And it's just, to me, so apparent on the reread that Fen and the people of Thalena required the tension. The Azish kind of required the connection, and Dalinar was able to do both and balance both, but they're from like different parts of himself, and he is kind of warring with how to be this thing, but he is both things. He is able to do both things for different groups of people, and the tension quite literally is palpable when he's in Thalen. He gets in a fight with the young son of Fen, not young son, he is a grown man, and challenges Dalinar to a duel, and then he uses the surge of tension to heal and to fix, and then bringing in Renarin to fix medically as well. I just think it's really a wonderful display of Dalinar's growth, even though he doesn't think that he's growing as it's happening. He feels like he's struggling. But
isn't that always the way? A lot of times we can't see the moments where we're growing the most. It just feels uncomfortable, and it takes kind of an outside perspective to notice, like, it feels uncomfortable because change is happening, because you're growing. And Dalinar is very uncomfortable. He's feeling very overwhelmed, which I think is really understandable. He is super worried about the Kholinar expedition. They haven't heard back from Adolin and Elokar. They don't know if his son and his nephew and his king are alive or not. He doesn't know what's happening with his homeland. He's also definitely feeling the weight of these memories that he's recovering. He's worried that he's going to fail at his mission of uniting Roshar because he's not a good enough diplomat. In the midst of all of this, he meets a Vaden soldier who starts talking about the thrill that is currently present in Yakaved. And this sparks Dalinar to feel the thrill again for the first time in a long time. Now that he has these memories back, he kind of knows the significance, the full weight of what the thrill is, what the thrill means to himself, which is terrifying. He takes off. He starts basically running through the city, like trying to avoid the thrill. He then is informed that he has been excommunicated from the Vorin church for heresy. And under the weight of all of these many, many things, Dalinar rushes back to Urethiru. He activates the Oathgate without a shard blade. He just kind of shoves the Stormfather's power into the Oathgate. And in order to escape the memories that are flooding back to him, the thrill that is kind of pounding on him, he once again turns to alcohol.
So this ability to use the Oathgates without a shard blade is right now unique to Dalinar, but I don't know if it is only about the bondsmith or if other Radiants are also able to do this or will be at some point, or if you can do it even without being a Radiant. I don't know what is a Fabrial capable of doing this. It certainly seems like Dalinar did something akin to summoning. Like, he didn't summon a shard blade, but he did pull something from the Stormfather, and the Stormfather didn't like it.
I think it's more like when he creates the perpendicularity. He's like pulling something out of the spiritual realm, which to me seems like an exclusively bondsmith thing.
Maybe that's correct. And maybe exclusively bondsmith I only might fight because there's these very weird windrunners who share a surge. But I think that you're right. It's probably some aspect that Dalinar is showing early what eventually will be his opening of a full perpendicularity.
Yeah.
And it's like he's opening the spiritual realm on one side of him, and then energy is flowing through him into the Oathgate, and that's what's unlocking it. It happens in the more normal way because a shard blade is that same thing. It's kind of like opening.
It's the key.
Yes, exactly. And Dalinar himself, in a way, has now become the key.
Yeah, interesting. After days of drinking to a stupor, Dalinar has a dream where he's talking to Nohadon and he explains his troubles, and Nohadon advises him that sometimes someone who seems like a hypocrite might just be a person in the middle of changing. After waking up from this dream, Dalinar remembers the events of Gavilar's funeral. He recovers from his bender and he jumps back into preparations for the war against the Voidbringers with all of the other monarchs. He realizes that the next strike, the next battle is going to happen in Thaylen City.
At this time, he brings Venli into a vision, tries to broker a treaty, but Venli says that there is no peace given except from Odium. Odium's in charge of everything, and at this moment, Odium breaks in to the vision.
Dalinar sees Odium, sees the presence of a god, and kind of thinks to himself, how is it even possible that we could defeat this thing? There's no point in asking for a contest of champions. Like, how are we supposed to beat a god? So he doesn't really fully go through with this interaction. He backs off a little bit, kind of in the way that he is feeling about being a diplomat. He underestimates himself, and so he kind of just dips out before fully committing. He then goes into a meeting of the monarchs, and this is a very important meeting.
Yes.
Many different pieces of information come to light.
Yeah, it's really the collision point of everything that Taravangian and Odium and the singers, as well as Dalinar, are working on. And this collision point is, by design meant to be like an Everstorm hitting a high storm, just causing more chaos this time political chaos, and in Words of Radiance, it was the physical chaos. And we have the revelations from the Elias Steel, the translations that are accurately describing the humans as the Voidbringers, the humans as the invaders, and the true problem on Roshar are not the singers, but the humans. This triggers, and part of this is because Taravangian wants it to trigger, but he is, drawing support, and the other monarchs are now kind of fleeing and breaking apart.
Yeah, there's a few different things that happen. That's one of the things that kind of breaks up this coalition. Another one is that Taravangian is like, oh, I just received a report that Dalinar has been having visions that he hasn't confided to the other monarchs, including that he met with Odium.
Exactly.
And so that's the other piece. Like, anyone who wasn't turned off by humans being the Voidbringers is turned off by the fact that Dalinar has not been fully honest with them, and in fact has been meeting with the enemy. And for all they know, he's colluding with the enemy. They feel like they can't trust anything that Dalinar says. So this coalition kind of falls apart, or at least is severely weakened, and many of the troops that had been gathered end up retreating from Thaylen City.
Even the Radiants, Bridge 4, are not led by Kaladin in this moment. He's in Shadesmar escaping from Kholinar, but Bridge 4 retreats from Thalena, goes back to Urithiru to wait for Kaladin, because they don't know how to proceed. They don't know
how to be
means.
Honorable.
Exactly. And it is perhaps the same question that was asked by Radiance in the distant past is now being asked again by this new set of Radiance. It's important, though, because Bridge 4's absence from Thaylen Field is significant to the battle. And then over there is Teft. And Teft gets to have his own story that we're not putting in chronological order.
Correct.
But it is, that's what's going on in the background here.
Now we have the big climax of the Battle of Thaylen Field. Dalinar ventures out onto Thaylen Field to meet Odium. Odium tells him that he's been preparing Dalinar for this exact moment because Dalinar is his champion. Odium unleashes the thrill, expecting it to overwhelm Dalinar and then turn him against his own people. But Dalinar resists this by acknowledging his past, by owning his past actions, taking responsibility for those actions, rather than giving up his pain to Odium in order for him to sort of feel oblivion or feel okay. It's in this moment that he opens Honor's Perpendicularity for the first time.
Just grab the realms and slam your fist together, kids, because from Honor's Perpendicularity comes the Shardblade or Silblade of Kaladin Stormblessed, as well as Shallan, Adolin, and the crew. Dalinar's heroic moment is, of course, flooding the field with a tremendous amount of stormlight and investiture. The battle is going to break out, and we're not going to fully detail the battle, but the kind of the next important, significant moment for Dalinar is Odium retreats. The thrill is still activated, and it turns humans. It's of note that this has never happened before, that the humans are somehow acting like the singers, that a new mechanism for control was used, because the thrill is not just inspiring the humans. It's not just like beating in the back of their minds. This is Odium's full control via the thrill.
I believe there are Voidspren, actually, that
on the other side
that go into the humans. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Which is a new thing, but it's not just the thrill, I think, is my point.
Okay, that's important. I'm saying, yes, that aspect of the Voidspren going through the thrill, or like being powered by the thrill to control the humans, that's the new thing that is occurring at this battle from a spiritual level or from a cognitive level. And Dalinar needs to capture the thrill. And so he is going to walk into that red mist and needs to understand the thrill, right? We saw this from Shallan earlier in the book. And
Dalinar mentions specifically that he learns this from Shallan, that this is the way to kind of access an unmade, is to try to understand it.
Yes, and he thanks the Thrill for the strength and for his survival in so many moments of his life. Of course, moments that he's now remembering and understanding, as has accepted, and he's accepted the Thrill, and oh boy, does the Thrill love this.
This is what enables him to trap the Thrill in the King's Drop ruby.
There's a little bit of important stuff that we will probably eventually talk about when it comes to the trapping or the controlling of the Unmade. We know we're excited about it when it comes to Wind and Truth with Ba-Ado Mishram and what happened there. But it was remarked in one of the epigraphs of Oathbringer that when Ba-Ado Mishram was captured, they needed a big, gigantic gemstone, and they needed Malishi, who was the bondsmith at the time. So there's something about bondsmiths, the binder of gods, that are essential to kind of capturing the Spren, at least it seems like in this way of like trapping them in a gemstone. And I just want to remark, I just want to throw this out there, that the sequence of events is Dalinar captures the Thrill, and then Moash is able to kill Jezrien in Kholinar with the special blade.
You think that those are related in some way?
Because of the theory that I threw out earlier about the Unmade and the Heralds being somehow connected, you have a possible Thrill Unmade that is connected to Jezrien.
You think that if the Thrill was not captured, then the Racium dagger just wouldn't work?
I don't know if I want to go that far with this speculation. But I do think that there is an element of, what is it? Like a Horcrux from Harry Potter with the Voldemort thing. You just like, I don't know. I don't know if you can kill a Herald only with the Racium dagger, if they're able to backdoor it in some way. But I am just throwing that out there. That's all. The Thrill is captured.
Like you are out there.
I'm so far out there.
You're really far out
Jezrien
there.
is in there. He's inside. No, but like this true death, because, okay, what happens to the Thrill? He's captured, right? But we don't think the Thrill is gone or dead.
Right.
permanently.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I think the Racium dagger is potentially showing the difference between like capturing and killing. And
yeah, for sure.
I am unsure if a permanent death would happen if the Unmade is around. That's my theory, because they're connected. However, let's talk more about what happens after, because we've clearly got to the end of Oathbringer, and now the time jump that happens is a year before the events of Rhythm of War.
Yes. Dalinar becomes the king of Urithiru. This is different than High King, as was sort of put forward by Elokar. He's just regular king. He doesn't have jurisdiction over any other kingdoms, including Alethkar. And Yasna, of course, is our queen of Alethkar.
Yeah, she is.
Wonderful. Dalinar also has learned how to read and write in this last year, and he has penned his own memoir, Oathbringer, My Glory and My Shame, which basically sets out all of his past, all of his mistakes, and everything just kind of laid bare, his full journey before destination.
The war has continued in a far more mundane, or at least like realistic sense for our own perspective, our own human perspective. It's gotten a little bit bogged down. There's been logistical issues, and the way that things are divided across the continent means that no side really has a true advantage. There are still the coalition forces that we talked about previously. There is the neutral Shin, but then there's the Ririn and the Eerie that have joined the side of Odium. And there's this big fight happening in Herdaz that is kind of resisting the conquest of the Singers at the beginning of Rhythm of War. And we're going to get that famous general and kind of the start of a Rhythm of War.
And Dalinar is still working with Taravangian, even though it's been revealed that Taravangian was behind Szeth's murders.
Though he claimed it was for different reasons. Just to be clear, he didn't give his full explanation.
Still,
yeah.
But still.
Oh, no. It's bad. It's like I killed your brother but I did it for different reasons than I actually did.
And Dalinar kind of just like takes him at his word, I guess.
I mean, I don't think he has options is really the thing, because he's too far into this whole uniting thing. There's a big problem with trying to unite people. Like, if you get one person to say yes, then you're kind of stuck with that person.
Yeah.
Because you can't disunite from bad people.
So, yeah, Dalinar is working on this war effort. Meanwhile, he's also navigating Jasnah's new governmental philosophies, like freeing the Alethi slaves. He's trying to learn about his bondsmith powers. He is collecting information about the heralds and the oath pact from Ash and Taln.
Who's kind of keeping prisoner.
Yeah, who is kind of keeping prisoner. He also has Szeth in a cell in Urithiru somewhere. Eventually, Dalinar goes on a military expedition to Emul. He leaves Navani in charge of Urithiru, and he decides to bring Szeth with him as a guard. Taravangian plans to betray Dalinar during this mission. They do find out about the betrayal and arrest Taravangian, and Dalinar's forces are able to defeat Taravangians.
Dalinar is definitely struggling with the new ruling style that Jasnah has put forward, and also kind of the desire that she has to be the last monarch of Alethkar.
Yeah, poor Dalinar. He's like, we just put this kingdom together. Like, we built this for you.
Yeah.
You're the daughter of, like, your father who made the kingdom for you.
I mean, we are going from his age of 19 to his current age of 54, 55 in Rhythm of War, that his entire life, lots of sacrifices, as we have now detailed, was about uniting Alethkar under a monarchy.
Yeah.
And Jasnah is like, nah, that was a dumb idea.
I mean, to be fair, it's still going to be united. She just wants it to be more of a democracy, but...
Which we are in favor of, just for the record.
Yeah, we are in favor. But I understand why Dalinar would be like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, Dalinar's not in favor. We are.
He's also struggling with Renarin's identity as a corrupted Radiant. This aspect of Renarin's Knight Radiant hood was revealed at the end of Oathbringer, and so that's kind of another thing that Dalinar is trying to figure out how to work with. Communication between Dalinar and Urithiru isn't happening. They're not really sure what's going on, and obviously a lot of his family, his wife, are there. That's also the center of his operations. And
he is the king of Urithiru,
exactly.
And he can't talk to Urithiru. We know this is because of the suppression mechanism that the Fused have used to kind of shut down. So nothing can get in, nothing can be expressed when it is inside, except for that adhesion surge and lift, because she's weird and we love her. But Dalinar is, because of this confusion, because of this lack of knowledge, he's trying to use the Stormfather as the storm moves over Roshar, and Dalinar is like, no, go back there. And he kind of forces the consciousness of the
because the
Stormfather.
Stormfather's just like blowing along like a storm, which just, passes through, but Dalinar's trying to get info. So he's like, go back. And the Stormfather's like, no, I can't. But Dalinar like forces himself back to the tower.
Yeah, he's able to get the information that he needs. That like Kaladin is crawling up the side of the tower like Spider-Man. And
well, he's injured, so not quite like Spider-Man. But
I mean, Spider-Man gets injured sometimes, I would guess, for a comic book hero. I do think that this is interesting. We often run into a character or an entity like the Stormfather that seems big, powerful, knowledgeable. And when they say something like, I can't do that, I'm the Storm, we take it for granted that that is true because they're big, powerful, and knowledgeable. And then in this moment, Dalinar is kind of saying like, no, you don't make the rules. Your consciousness is not attached to the storm. Your consciousness is where I want it to be in this moment, at least. That's what we see on display.
Yeah, I'm curious what is going to happen with the Stormfather. There's a few moments like that in Rhythm of War where Dalinar is talking to the Stormfather kind of about the essence of who the Stormfather is,
right?
If he can change. And I'm not willing to say that I think the Stormfather is wrong. And it's like, no, really, you can change. It may be that the Stormfather can change, but will no longer be the Stormfather.
I think
I think he is maybe right in that sense of like, if I behave in too many ways that are not like the storm, I will no longer be the storm. I'll be something else. I don't know what that would look like.
Yes. Well, I think it's the difference between a stick and fire, right? The stick wants to be a stick, but it could be fire.
But then, like, what happens to Roshar if there are no more high storms? I think that would be bad.
I would maybe challenge the concept that there needs to be a storm father for there to be storms on Roshar. Hypothetically, the storm father is the spren of storms.
Yeah.
But this gets back to the question that we asked many episodes ago. Do Windspren create the wind? Does the Stormfather create the storms, or is he a function, manifestation after the storm's existence? I don't want to get so philosophical.
Like such a long conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do think it's interesting, though, that we're seeing these challenge points directly when it comes to the Stormfather. And Dalinar is the one to challenge it, but he's not the only thing being challenged. In Rhythm of War, it's the Honor Spren that we see with different characters, but they are stuck in their ways. They are stubborn. They are resistant to change. And sometimes they use both examples of the Stormfather is the Spren of Storms, and he is resistant and stubborn to change. And then it's the same time, they'll be like, but he bonded Dalinar, and that means something. And that is a sign of something. And maybe it's the sign that, like, Honor is not dead as long as he lives in the hearts of men.
Okay.
I want to stay. Yes, we were getting back. Love
Dalinar brings his consciousness to the tower. He sees Kaladin. He learns from Kaladin that the fused have infiltrated the tower. And then Dalinar uses the storm winds to blow Kaladin back inside the tower and saves his life, basically. Because of this, Dalinar is inspired to visit Ishar in order to learn more about his bondsmith's abilities so that he can help free Urithiru. So they take off their Falayan to Tukar to go see Ishar, and the Stormfather tells Dalinar that Kaladin has thrown himself off the tower. This is the climax of Rhythm of War. And Dalinar asks the Stormfather to give Kaladin more time. When that doesn't work, he himself makes another step and connects Kaladin to the spiritual realm.
Yeah, we, again, could get off on lots of tangents and lots of speculation about this scene, but it is a capital C connection that takes Kaladin out of time, or at least slows time greatly for him because it's happening while he is falling, and he has an experience with Tien that we talked about in the Kaladin episode and have talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Dalinar is going to make that meeting with Ishar. It is quickly apparent that Ishar is, suffering from madness.
He is unwell.
You previously described it as megalomania, and I love that description. I love what we talked about when it comes to Ishar and the way that other people refer to him, Nail specifically, is like, Ashar will know what's going on. We all love Ashar. Ashar's such a great guy. And when you make that connection over to Scadrial, when having access to connection makes people like you more, makes connecting on every level easier for those people. Ashar is like the ultimate peak of that. He's a compounder on top of a compounder of connection.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I don't know if we have any evidence right now if that is what is like coming into play, but it would make sense. I also think it just makes sense that the heralds would feel this way about like someone who was their leader at one point.
Yes, I definitely
and just kind of
can understand
refusing to see his decline because they don't want to, basically.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think that it's interesting if it was always part of his abilities. That like the reason he is the leader is because he was doing the connection in the first place.
Okay, then we get like
yes, we do.
Okay.
And I think that this scene, we see a bunch of interesting stuff. We don't know if it's all things that Dalinar can do, but like Ishar connects the Windrunners to the planet itself, and all of their stormlight flows into Roshar. He's doing some weird experiments with Spren, seemingly trying to bring them from the cognitive into the physical realm.
Yeah. We haven't seen the Spren yet, though. He starts to fight the Windrunners. The Windrunners can't defeat him. Dalinar ends up opening a perpendicularity, which causes Ashar to use that opportunity to try to transfer the Stormfather's bond with Dalinar to himself. Zeth sees this and he uses Nightblood to sever the capital C connection between Dalinar and Ashar, close the perpendicularity, and then he also chips Ashar's shard blade with Nightblood.
Is it his shard blade or his honor blade?
His honor blade, yeah.
Only Nail has a Spren blade.
Correct.
And so this is Ishar's honor blade.
Yeah, which is the only way that he has all of these powers, because he has his honor blade.
Of course.
Yeah. Then Ashar retreats through his own perpendicularity. And in the moment when Navani bonds the sibling, Ashar becomes lucid. He tells Dalinar to come see him in Shinovar and to help him regain his sanity, after which he can help Dalinar with his bondsmith powers.
And then it's after Ashar leaves that the group kind of comes upon
yes.
the weird
They're
experiments
like, what
with
was
the
he
Spren.
doing here? Ew, gross. Let's leave. Which
Not
is
great.
the appropriate response.
The final aspect of Rhythm of War that we want to cover and the setup is happening in the year 1175, the 4th month, the 10th week, and the 4th day. Dalinar is 55 years old, and Odium pulls Dalinar into a vision, the final vision that we know of, and they set the terms of the contest of champions. These terms are in part drafted by Jasnah with help from Hoid. They are
attempted.
Yes.
But yeah, Odium does not accept
those terms.
The terms that Hoid lays out.
Do you think that's because he knows that Hoid was involved, or he just doesn't want the
No,
deal?
I mean, I think Hoid put forth terms that are unfavorable to Odium.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes what you try to do in a negotiation. You start
I
real
don't
far
think
out.
like maybe he does know that Hoid was involved, but I don't think that that is like necessarily the thing that causes him to reject them.
I only ask because we do see a final moment with Hoid going to visit Terravodium.
Yes.
And we had heard previously that if Rhaesa knew that Hoid was on the planet, that he would devote a lot of his attention to destroying Hoid.
Yeah.
So let me know what you think, listener. At this time, at the signing of the final terms, is Odium aware that Hoid is on the planet and, kind of sleeping with Jasnah? Is he aware that there is so much involvement of Hoid at this time? I don't know if I could say confidently one way or the other. So you let me know what you think. Do you want to go over the final terms with us?
I would love to.
Hit me with those final terms.
Quote, final terms are these. A contest of champions to the death. On the 10th day of the month Pala, 10th hour. We each send a willing champion, allowed to meet at the top of Urithiru, otherwise unharmed by either side's forces. If I win that contest, you will remain bound to the system, but you will return Alethkar and Herdaz to me, with all of their occupants intact. You will vow to cease hostilities and maintain the peace, not working against my allies or our kingdoms in any way.
Agreed, Odium said. But if I win, I keep everything I've won, including your homeland. I still remain bound to this system and will still cease hostilities as you said above. But I will have your soul to serve me immortal. Will you do this? Because I agree to these terms.
And I, Dalinar whispered, I agree to these terms, end quote.
Oh man, I don't like those terms. They're good.
They're okay.
They're good
okay.
terms. Let's just call out the one, I think, real important thing that the terms establish. Win or lose, Odium remains bound to the Rosharan system.
Yes, correct. Yeah, he tries to wiggle out of that, and Dalinar's like, absolutely not.
Exactly. This is the same for both sides of the equation. But transfer of land, transfer of people, hostilities ceasing. No, the real thing is if Dalinar loses the contest of champions, his immortal soul becomes the servant of Odium.
Yeah, big bummer.
I'm so scared. I'm so scared of this because it is what we have seen from specifically some of those far future books. I'm talking about The Sunlit Man. I'm talking about Yumi, and even something like The Lost Metal, when we're seeing more of this like collisions across the Cosmere or hearing about them secondhand or third hand. People don't seem to like Rosharans. People are afraid of Rosharans in that far future of the Cosmere. And I'm wondering if that's because when they left Roshar, they did it with the immortal Odium Dalinar corrupted soul at the forefront. If he's the first thing that gets off Roshar is my deepest, darkest fear.
Yeah, I guess like I'm worried that there is a circumstance where Dalinar thinks, oh, well, if we lose, like I'm the sacrifice. You know, I'm really the only one that has to suffer if this happens. So like I'll just do that, and doesn't really realize what Odium will use him for, or like how powerful the Blackthorn is in Odium's hands. I feel like maybe that's selling Dalinar short a little bit, that he wouldn't think of that, but that's my fear.
Well, I do think that what they hear about Taln and the Heralds is they were tortured for a really long time and they were kind of used and manipulated by Odium, but that's it. That's the limit. Maybe not understanding how bound they are to the Rosharan system, they kind of think like that's the top end of bad, and it's not the top end of bad. If you can spread chaos, spread destruction around the rest of the Cosmere.
Yeah, I mean, the terms of serve me immortal, I think is pretty obviously different from just like, let me torture you forever, you know?
Yes.
Like, those are definitely different ideas.
Yeah,
so
the immortal aspect is the same.
Hopefully Dalinar and the people around him, smart people like Navani and Yasna, would understand that those are different things.
There's a lot of speculation I know out there on the internet. There's people who are reading the early chapters of Wind and Truth. We encourage you all to, throw out your speculation, lay down some knowledge that you think is going to happen, but
almost all spoilers, no spoilers for Wind and Truth.
Exactly. Just in this short period of time, we're have about a month left.
Yeah.
It's Dalinar's final act in Rhythm of War to send Kaladin with Szeth to Shinovar to kind of
a surgeon's capacity,
not as a general.
Yes, because Kaladin is like, hey man, would love to keep working on that mental health stuff, and Dalinar's like, you know who's crazy is Shar. You can cut your teeth real easy with one of the craziest people on the planet.
Best of luck, surgeon /
Goodbye.
Psychiatrist
with no formal training.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if they took like just a brand new psychology student and was like, here's
Hannibal Lecter.
Here's Hannibal Lecter. Best of luck.
You got it.
Yeah,
he eats you. That's what happens. Shar's going to eat them. We have so many, exciting tidbits, clearly a lot of theories that mainly I'm throwing out, and lots of speculation. But these chronological episodes have really helped me put things in perspective and helped me speculate on what is coming next for our characters. So we've certainly enjoyed the time going back and looking at all of these things.
Just a few more episodes left until Wind and Truth comes out, so stay tuned for all of our lead-up content.
The last mention you have until this Sunday, that's November 3rd, to join the Patreon to be entered into a raffle for Looking for the Light art book. Brooke, can you take us away?
Until next time, life before death,
strength before weakness,
journey before destination.